Good morning. In continuation of the kind of conversations that we've been having for the past few days, largely industry connect, whether it was the first 2 days with Filma Lula and Neom, or whether it was yesterday, an entire day of discussing distribution and the last end. Today we go to the start of the pipeline, which is the script, and therefore the writer. And therefore the all-important, and today very much in the news, the matter about rights, IPR for writers, and fresh on the tail of the writers' strike, the much talked about writers' strike in the US and all that followed, and the kind of negotiations that happened and results that it heaped or not, whatever. That time alone will tell whether they come to fruition. However, let us look at the ecosystem, the state of affairs in our country, and nobody better to drive this. So we start the day with IPR for writers, and this time we're talking about provisions and implementation. And we have a very esteemed panel. We've got the key negotiator, and very famous, well-known, established screenwriter Anjum Rajabali, who for the last 2 decades has been working on this ideal contract for writers. So may I please invite you up. Joining him, we have Shakun Batra, writer, director. Shakun would also have, I hope he shares it with us, he would also have a lot of war stories because he's working on both sides. He's just wrapped up a contract with the Guild in the US, and of course, he's been working in this country for a while. So 2 sides of the spectrum, let's see what he has to say. Another very prolific writer, young writer, who's also been with the Screenwriters Association for 4 terms, I think, as the 2 terms, is Atika Chohan. We have the General Secretary of Screenwriters Association, Zama Habib, also a very well-known screenwriter, joining us. To ensure that it is not an outpouring of angst and we can balance the is we have someone who represents writers but is constantly negotiating with the studio for the studio because he's also a producer now. We have the founder of Matter, Caleb Franklin. And the lawyer in the mix. Very well known for some really landmark judgments and cases, Priyanka Khimani. Holding this volatile mix together, let's make it volatile, no please. Yeah, is very well known author and contributing editor to Business Standard, Vanita Kohli Khandekar. Hi. So, yes, it is provisions and implementation, but before we get into implementation, let's know what we are implementing. So, Anjum Rajabali, who's been also a lot of people call him the father of this ideal contract, and he's also the key negotiator from Screenwriters Association. So, he'll present and set the agenda for the day. Anjum, may I request you to please come up and start.
Thank you, Anupama. And thank you, Vanita, for agreeing to moderate this session. Most people would feel that it's rather boring, but I assure you it's not. You know that it's not. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. And thank you very much, all of you. Actually, the issues are very simple. The film industry, when I say film industry, I cover television as well as OTT and every form of screen entertainment which is narrative based, storytelling entertainment. So the industry, if it has to function like an industry, then there has to be some regulation within that, which means every person who is a member of that industry has to have a well-defined role with certain rights, responsibilities, accountability, and that is how an industry can function smoothly like a well-oiled machine. Now the factor which regulates these relationships is a document called the contract. And this is what we're going to discuss today, that the contracts which are prepared for writers, which writers are made to sign, are they really fair to both sides? Do they follow the principle of good business practice? Is there a principle of mutuality within them? Because that is what a contract is meant to be. It's a contract between two parties, where this person wants something that this person has. This person needs something that this person has, a writer and a producer. The producer needs the writer because without the script, there is no business. There is nothing. I mean, if the writer doesn't do her job, the others don't have a job. Because that's where it starts. I mean, if an architect doesn't draw the blueprint, how do you construct a building? So the producer needs that. Fair enough. What does the writer need from the producer? The ability to be paid and the ability to make a film out of that so that the career can start. That is what he wants to do. As simple as that. So why is it that this has become such a contentious issue? The complaint is coming from writers, and the complaint is very simple, that there are certain rights which are due to us, which we are not receiving. What are those rights? A writer writes essentially for two things, very simply. Money, the fees which come to him, with which uska kitchen chalta hai. School ki fees bhari jati hai, rent bharta hai, okay, and that his family is secure, that bhaiya khana pina milega, kharcha pani niklega, correct. The second thing that the writer writes for is her credit, because with the credit, she has a future. People see the name on the screen, they like the film, they invite her, write my next film. Again they see the name, write my next film. So the career proceeds. If there is no credit available to the writer, even though she has worked, she doesn't have a career. So these are the two things which are most important to us. Now, what is it that is coming in the way of this? Let's start. Number one, every company has an overriding objective to maximize profits, to have an eye on the bottom line. So one way of doing it is by increasing your earnings. The other way of doing it is by reducing your expenses. And this is where the writers get hurt, because in a bid to reduce those expenses, the company tries to reduce wherever it is that it can. Now it's able to reduce it when it comes to writers. Writers are complaining of being paid fees, which for junior writers are less than undignified. Okay. A lot of free work takes place. Why is this happening? Why is the junior writer not able to argue for her rights and ensure that she receives them? Because of the disproportionate bargaining power which is there. A company lawyer sitting there, a senior executive sitting there, backed by the millions that she or he represents, and a writer who's meant to be a needy person looking for work. So therefore it doesn't have any bargaining power, as a result of which a lot of unfair clauses are rammed down the throats of those writers. So the fees which are being paid are really not reflecting the value that the writer brings in with the script. All of you here are either writers or at least are aware of what a script is, what the filmmaking process is, and what role the script occupies in that. The script is a complete film on paper. The first time that a film is made is on the writer's computer screen. Because a script, unlike a novel, is written for the screen. So every line which is written there actually reflects how it is meant to play on the screen, which means that the writer is imagining the film and putting it down on paper. So that the director and the DOP and the editor and the sound person and the music person is able to then take those indications, use their own creativity and their skills to translate it into a film. That is the second time that the film is being made. This is how important the script is. So number one, as I told you, is the fees. Number two, and most important for the future of the writer and for her career, is the credit. Now what is happening here? What are the pain point? What is the pain point here that we are wanting to discuss? If a writer, say Madam X, is hired for a particular function that you are being asked to write the screenplay of this particular film. This is the story we are giving you. Please give us the screenplay. So what is the function being performed? Screenplay. These are the fees that you will be paid. Now, after that, there is an overriding clause that the producer puts in which says that the final credit will be at the discretion of the producer. Now, this is what kills the writer, that if I'm performing the task of writing the screenplay, why is it that I cannot be guaranteed my credit? Why should the discretion lie with the producer? The argument that the producers give is that if there are multiple writers, which is fair enough, that there are supposing 3 writers, the producer is entitled to engage other writers. So if I've written a script, I did my best, didn't really fulfill what the requirement of the producer was, fair enough. So he engages Zama Habib, saying, you write it. After Zama, he engages Atika Chohan, saying, okay, now can you do a final rewrite? I need a little more drama, a little more sentiment in this or that. She does that. Now becomes a tussle. Who is it that should get the first credit, the second credit, the third credit here? And here the producer uses his discretion to say that I will decide. Now their extraneous factors get into the picture, like I might be a senior writer. Atika is my student. So obviously she at the moment feels that I am lower in status, so to say. How can I argue with Anjum sir about this? And the producer perhaps wants me because Atika has come in recently. I've been around for a long time and he wants me to write his next project. So I get favored. But in the process, Atika gets shortchanged, even though she might have done 60% of the work actually in the rewrite. So what we're looking for is a fair way to ensure that the final credit is based on a clear assessment of whose work has appeared on the screen. Not who is a senior writer or who's a junior writer or who has a biodata or doesn't have a biodata or what was promised to me or not. Its credit means, ye kaam jo aap dekh rahe hain parde pe, ye kiska kaam hai? That is what the audience wants to know. Ye kisne likha hai? अब वो ये नहीं जानना चाहता है कि भैया अंजुम को तो पहले बोला था कि आपको सोलो क्रेडिट मिलेगा तो उसी को मिलेगा, पर उसका काम नहीं है वो. उसके 10 सीन है, 90 सीन अतिका के हैं. So therefore there has to be a fair assessment and it has to be done by people who understand the craft. This is screenplay writing, it is a technical craft also. It's not merely कि भाई कहानी बोल दी. There is actually an evaluation, there is a structure, there is a rhythm, it has to be evaluated. Who has contributed to that? Now, who is the one who can do that? That is the second point. The producer is not in a position to do that. The third point that I am bringing in here is that every time a draft of a script is submitted, and this I'm sure people like Caleb and even Priyanka who actually straddle both sides will bear me out on this, that the contract says if you are submitting a first draft, the money will be paid on approval of the first draft. Now there's no such thing as approval of the first draft because the first draft by its very nature is an interim draft which has to be revised. So there is no approval, you can only give feedback on that. There is no benchmark for approval there. But this is the way that a producer controls the flow of money. Okay, no, I'm sorry, I don't approve of this draft. Rewrite the first draft. A first draft cannot be rewritten. It becomes a second draft. Okay, then you have to pay for the first draft. So what we're asking for is an internationally accepted practice that it is based on delivery, on submission. I submit to you the first draft as long as it fulfills the entire criteria that is this a full screenplay draft? Yes. Does it follow the format? Yes. Is it based on the story that was given to you? Yes. Pay me my money. Where does the approval come into the picture? Final draft? Yeah, I can understand. In the final draft, yes, before you move on to the shooting, you need to have an approval from the director and whoever the key people are. I understand that. But interim drafts? That. Number 4. There is a whole lot of indemnity which is heaped on the writer. And this you will find very amusing, you people who perhaps may not be aware of this particular aspect of the contract. That if there is some public disturbance because of the film. If somebody's religious sentiments are hurt, if somebody springs up and does a tandav on you, or puts in a police complaint, or starts destroying theatres and tearing up posters and burning up producers' offices, the writer has to indemnify the producer, which means I have to pay the cost. Whoa! You must understand that in a script, as far as the Copyright Act is concerned, there are two components, two factors: ownership and authorship. The authorship remains with the writer. Atika continues to be the author and known as the author, whereas the ownership of the script gets transferred. So those rights under the Copyright Act get transferred so that the producer can make the film, do business later, etc. Right? Now you're owning the script. Before you pay me the final draft ka money, you are approving of the draft. You have lawyers. Ask Priyanka, I don't know how many scripts she reads. She's asked to read, the producer asks her to read every line, every word. And she said, no, I think this may create trouble. I think mahal aisa hai. So one has to be a little careful about that. The marketing people read. Now all your battery of experts have read it. Then why should I be indemnifying you? You indemnify me. Because you are the owner of the script. You are the owner of the film. So this is another point which hurts writers. Then there is one absurd point which comes in, which not all contracts have, but some of them unfortunately have, saying if you have a grievance with the producer, the writer is not allowed to approach his or her association, which is SWA. I mean, it's a constitutional right. The reason why I belong to the union is because the union helps me when I am in trouble. Now you're saying you can't go there. It's like saying, if you are in trouble, you will not consult your uncle. Yo, he's my uncle, he's supposed to protect me. I can go and take advice from him. I'm not asking you to be obligated that you have to listen to what the union says and you have to abide by the decision. But I can approach the union. The union is there for me. I paid membership fee. Zama Habib has to ensure that I am protected, I am defended. Okay. Now that comes into the picture. Likewise, there are certain other things. I will not go into all of them, but these are the key ones. Then there's also something called advance royalty, but let's not go into that too much. But these are the simple things. Now Priyanka knows what I'm referring to. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, what is it that can be done about this? Because here, this is not a place for chest beating. That time is over. It's not a place for rhetorical lament that hi, देखो हमारे साथ क्या हो रहा है, ऐसा कैसा कर सकते हैं वो time गया. Now is the time for some action. We need solutions here. You know how many members SWA has? You know what is SWA, the Screenwriters Association, which is the trade union of, there are other trade unions in other parts of the country, but this is the biggest one because it's based in Bombay, which is the filmmaking capital of this country. You know how many members we have? Nobody wants to take a guess because you will be way off the mark. We have 64,000 members. Okay? It's an army that we have built up, of which about roughly 9,000 are working writers, the rest are aspiring writers. Likewise, there's the Telugu Association, Tamil Association, and the Malayalam Association here. India makes films in 17 languages. We represent roughly 14 of those language cinemas in SWA. So what is the way out? If I'm saying that Atika as an individual finds it very difficult to stand up against the corporate lawyers or the corporate representatives, the business heads, and if they say, okay, fine, take it or leave it, and she needs the job, so then she's forced to give in. Caleb, who is also a representative of writers. He represents writers, he manages their careers, and he holds their interests best at heart. But he himself will tell you that when he goes to argue, one of the key things that the client wants, which is the writer, कि भैया काम मेरे को तू दिला के दे, कि I would like that contract because I want to do that film. Now, he's also stuck in that, so he will argue as much as he can, he will negotiate as much as he can, and certain places, I guarantee you, he is forced to compromise. Am I right or am I right, Caleb? Yeah. Okay, he will give you his piece. But yes, this has been my experience with agents, and I understand that. It's not just here, even in Hollywood. So what is the way out? The way out is collective bargaining, which means that you have a union where all of you are members. Okay, all the writers are members. An individual writer doesn't have the bargaining power, but the union, if it collectively represents all its members, then it has the power which at least reduces the disproportionate, between the producer and the writer, because we have a representation of so many writers. So we are able to sort of therefore have more muscle, more leverage. Now, is that happening? Yes. That is what we are doing right now. The Screenwriters Association has drawn up a whole, we've examined hundreds of writers' contracts. We've spoken with, dozens and dozens of writers. Many more, actually really hundreds of writers we've spoken with, because we have a legal officer who examines all contracts. A writer is encouraged that once you get a draft of a contract, show it to the legal officer at SWA so that they are able to guide you. So therefore we are aware of what is going on here. And there is a large-scale distress and outrage and anger in the writing community. So SWA has taken it upon itself as the trade union of writers to ensure that we begin collective bargaining to try and rectify these wrongs, okay, including credit arbitration, including a minimum fee, which we can then discuss those details when Vanita sort of takes over. So those details I will speak about. The WGA, the last thing that I will mention, Vanita, the WGA recently had a strike, which of course was celebrated, so everybody is aware of that. 148 days, no pen was put to paper. 11,560 screenwriters across all platforms. No one wrote. Not a single word was written. Shows came to a halt. Repeats started running out of steam. No film shooting happened. New film shooting. They managed to succeed. Finally, those biggies came to the table and they managed to sit down and say, okay, let's renegotiate the contract. Those clauses to which they had said no question. The producers had said no question about us discussing this. Off the table. They came back and they agreed to that. Why? One, unity worked. When all the writers are together and they trust the union to represent them, then things change. The entire ecosystem changes. WG has been doing this for decades together. We are late starters because ours has been a feudal place, but we're starting now. Okay, so starting actually today. Today is the first negotiation meeting that I have. I mean, as she said, I'm the key negotiator for SWA, and Zama Habib is with me because he's the leader of SWA as the General Secretary. So we're starting our first negotiation now, and we hope to come back with more news. What the details are, how we intend to do it, that we can have during the discussion. Thank you. That stumble was a bad beginning to a historic process.
I hope that's not an omen of anything. That worries me. Just, on with great negotiations today. But fantastic, Anjum, really, for creating the framework in which we have this discussion. Because that's exactly what Anupama and I were saying. We don't want it to become a litany of complaints. I was in California on Chutti in May, and I went to the Warner Brother lot, sat on Sheldon's sofa and did all the things that I wanted to do. But the thing is, when I came outside, the striking writers were there. The strike was going on. And I clicked pictures and I talked to them. And, it just hits you when I spent 15 days largely in Los Angeles and places around, and you could see them all over. That kind of stuff I've never seen. I think in 1986, the film business had a strike. The entire industry went on a strike. It was a very famous strike for some entertainment tax, I think, because entertainment tax had gone beyond a certain level. But I've not seen that kind of unity. But quickly jumping into the subject, I'm spoiled for choice here because I want to talk to all of you. But because Anjum has laid out the writer's perspective so well, I'd like Priyanka, you, Shakun, Caleb to come in first and bring out the other perspective, especially when you're talking from the writer's side to the studios. What is it they come up with it? Especially on the issue of fees. And fees I can understand, it's a matter of beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, but...
Okay, that's a tough one, but I'm being thrown into the deep end.
Yes,
so I'm going to try and rise to the occasion.
You're the only lawyer on this panel. So.
No, like I said, Anjum
is half a lawyer.
He'll run me out of business soon. But, okay, so I think just to give everyone perspective, I've negotiated extensively on behalf of a lot of creators in the country, across film and TV, music, advertising, and so on and so forth. More often than not, I've been on the side of talent, representing them against organizations. I don't want to say against really, but more on the opposite side, right? You have organizations, streaming platforms, social media services, studios, producers, and so on and so forth. And this is one general thumb rule that I end up using with all matters and all clients, is that it is ultimately a commercial negotiation. There is a give and there is a take. You have to find that healthy balance. Any contract has to have that element of you feeling that, hey, I didn't get shortchanged, especially with writers, with creators. It's the beginning of a much larger project, right? So the first step can't leave you with that feeling in your mouth that, hey, I've been shortchanged, I'm being taken advantage of. So that's number one. Number two, and many times I have a lot of creators feel that, oh, but they're asking me to give up all my copyright. That's illegal. Try and understand what is legal and what is illegal. Just because somebody is asking you to give up all copyright is not necessarily something illegal. Like I say, it's a willing seller, willing buyer. That being said, there is a construct. There are certain boundaries that you have to adhere to or can adhere to. And of course, bargaining power will change depending on, all sorts of factors, seniority, talent, merit. But I feel that's one important thing to bear in mind. So it is not, just to clarify, there's nothing illegal about someone asking for an outright assignment or an outright license. Yes, there may be certain illegality when it comes to you being made to compulsorily waive certain rights. For example, like Anjum mentioned, when it comes to your credit, when it comes to your right to receive royalties, right? Outside of this, if you still want bargaining power, there are all sorts of clever contractual fixes to it, right? For example, if your works are going to be recreated, adapted, you want to be attached or you want to have a say, that's a contractual fix. Again, there is nothing, it's not an entitlement that comes to you within the statute that, oh, if I have written it, I must, as a matter of right, also be attached to what happens to the future of those works, right? So I feel to everyone generally, it's important to bear that in mind, especially when you're negotiating with the producer on the other side of the studio. Naturally, their mentality is that, hey, we're writing you the check. If I pay for it, I own it. So it's about still finding contractually what is it that can safeguard the future of your works, whilst you, even if you end up passing on all rights in favor of the producer or the studio.
I want to come back to this thing on royalty, which Anjum had brought up. But first, Caleb, let's get you in. You come from the agency or the talent management side. And do you see more, is it the bigger guys who've had a couple of successes who are more likely to come to you to seek an agent, the younger people? And are you likely to seek names which have some work to their credit than have younger writers who are just beginning out? How does it work? I mean, I'm sure the agency chooses its clients.
Yeah, it's a great question. We often find ourselves aggressively hunting for great stories, no matter where they exist and who's telling them. And so, we represent over 100 writers at Matter. And they range from very, very senior to someone who we've discovered in London who may have a script. So I think it really goes across the board. But just to what Priyanka was saying and more into what we're seeing, I think over the last 10 years, we have seen writers' fees go up. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of their protections go down. We see a lot of writers working for free. The approval construct is just such a big one that we are constantly fighting. And, the producers or the platforms push back on it because, frankly, they can. But, I've been working with writers for 20 years. I started my career in Hollywood working with the likes of John Wells, who did ER, Shonda Rhimes. And so I come from a world where these things are just so obvious. We would get into a deal negotiation and really you're talking about pay my client more money, make sure the credit's in the main titles, not the back titles. And here, we're talking about limitation of liability and I often look at my team and they're like, why isn't this contract closing over limitation of liability when the writer owns no IP, right? Like it's a bit ridiculous. And I'm really excited for what Anjum and the organization at the SWA is doing. I think it's very important. I think we all will make a lot more money when there's a template, when we can get into a contract and not have to negotiate all 63 pages of it. You know, when I started in India, there were 12-page contracts. Now the contracts are longer than the screenplays. So, yeah, we should figure it out, and I hope we do it quickly.
I want to come back to the templatize and that approval construct again, Anjum. That's something we need to, because you talked about specific clauses need to be inserted. There can't be a standard contract which, you know, SWA could sort of mandate or make it saying that this is a staff which has a minimum wage and a minimum, you know, minimum credit approval sort of. How is that something which is possible? I know I'm pulling you in earlier than, because the idea was to get Shakun in, but quickly if you could thing on.
Yeah, the point here is that given the number of production companies which are there in this country, it's not possible for us to have a standard contract that each one of them will follow. They have their own lawyers, they have their own considerations, and obviously which is fair, which is justified. But the key clauses which are there, which I have
basic
referring
minimum
to,
sort of.
yeah, so those, I'm saying the principles which inform those clauses, those have to be agreed upon and documented. This is for example, credit arbitration that we spoke about. There's a whole process and protocol of credit arbitration which has to be then determined and it has to be followed. There's a formula of who will get credit and who will not and how much contribution should be there to deserve a credit, first credit, second credit. That has to be documented and agreed across the board and implemented through the contract.
Correct.
So that is what we are aiming to do. And certain offensive clauses like this whole indemnity thing, which we want to restrict that only that we will indemnify you when if it is confirmed in court that I plagiarized somebody's work. After that, whatever be the other thing, you have to indemnify me.
Yeah.
So those kind of protective things have to be put in. And Priyanka, I feel that sometimes I wonder whether this goes beyond the commercial also, that I am asking for protection in a way which is not hurting you. Which is not hurting you at all. I mean, if you're giving me credit, how is it hurting you?
Yeah.
If a fair credit is given, what is your problem?
Absolutely.
It can't just be your ego that I will decide. Why will you decide? The work will decide.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're asking for. I think everything that we've asked for is reasonable.
You know, we must, I don't know, a lot of people, young people here, but a lot of territory has been covered in the last 20 years, and Anjum has seen this business from the 90s. But when it comes to contract and legality, even now there's so much ambiguity, so often, not just in films, in music, across the... Shakun, you just negotiated with somebody in the US. Could you just take us through your experiences? And also, where do you come from as a writer and as a filmmaker on this whole thing?
Well, I'm assuming most of you here are writers.
Okay, how many writers? Raise your hands.
Okay, great. So I think 85% people here are writers. I just want to tell you, from all the things, different roles that I've played, starting as a director's assistant to now directing and some bit of producing, writing is the hardest thing I've ever done. I think I can make a career as a director much more easily than as a writer. Writing is the hardest part of the work.
It's traumatizing.
And I can also say this.
Thank you.
And I can also say this without any doubts in my mind that the contracts are extremely lopsided. And I've been on both sides. I've worked with writers where I give them contracts, and I've been a writer for studios where I've been paid by the studio. And so I've signed both sides of the contract. And it's a very nuanced debate to be had, because I think both sides have certain positions which are important to them, and one has to understand how that can be done. My closest friend, who's also my co-writer, is a hairstylist, and this is our running joke between us. On my movie, she's the writer and she's a hairstylist on the project. And on our first two films, she made more money as a hairstylist. On the third one, she covered up because we paid her bonus. And I've had this, and I've had these conversations with people at SWA, because it really hurts her and me that I can't promise her more as a writer. And Priyanka's, as I grew, as I was writing more, as I was doing more deals, I realized the first thing you need to do is find your ecosystem. Find people who can protect you. Caleb, Priyanka have been both very important part of my growing up. And there is no way how much we talk about contracts, you will ever understand a contract so well that you can do it on your own. Never. Even at this stage, we make mistakes. There's always a contract that will get the better of you. So it's never going to be like, oh, I've read a contract, I understand it. And so you get a person who can negotiate. You get a person who can, it's well worth it. That 10% is going to go a long way. Number one. Number two, I think the conversation that I've also had with SWA, because I strongly feel for it, even when I'm producing ads, there are times where if you have a really big star, their entourage money is way more than the director or the writer. And it's happened on all films that I work with. Obviously, I'm extremely thankful that I've had the opportunity of working with big actors and stars. But it hurts me that when the entourage is traveling business class and there are no bars on what they can spend, what food they can order, and then you see a dialogue writer who's been told, pay for this bill, why did you submit this bill to us? And I feel the basic thing that I want to fight for, and I really want to stand up for this at some point in my life, and I'm always open, I've had a chat with Mitesh, is producers have to agree that if a writer is of a certain experience, of course when you're just starting out, you don't have that kind of leverage and negotiation power, but when a writer, let's say, is 2 movies, 3 movies old, your entourage budget, which is the hair, makeup, wardrobe budget, can't be more than your writing budget. How can you tell me that an actor looking good is more important than the content of the film? It's absolutely rubbish. So I really strongly feel things have to change. And as Anjum said, we are, as a writer today, we are in a place where we can change. We can change the system. We can push them. And it's going to be a long fight. It's going to take a lot. But I think, one, we have to do it collectively. And I also feel we have to stand up for each other, right? And I feel I sometimes meet a writer, as you rightly said, I worked on a project for 3 months with a writer. It didn't go anywhere. I wasn't happy with what it was. And it was, it's a tough place. You have to sit down with somebody and be like, hey buddy, we spent 3 months, not happy. So I'm going to have to take it to somebody else. And the next writer's first thing is, if he gets a credit, then I can't do it. Now, this is a thing that one needs to understand. I am losing out on finding my next writer if I give credit to this writer. So that's where I'm coming on the producer side, where they want control of the credit. Because if I credit him, I can't get the writer I want. So these things get very complicated, very nuanced. Most of the time, I really honestly rely on conversations with Caleb, Priyanka, a couple of my friends, and having honest chats with writers. Priyanka's helped a very dear friend of mine have a contract, which after she delivered 2 drafts, and I know a lot of her material got used for the film, they actually wanted to have a conversation about not giving her opening credits. And thankfully the contract was strong enough that they couldn't change that around. So thank you. And that's what I really think. I think surround yourself with people who care, who protect you. And I think let's talk about how to do this, because it's honestly enraging to know that it is such a lopsided contract. But at the same time, I think the idea is not to do it with anger, but from a place of understanding. And I hope this conversation can actually start that,
And that.
Shakun, sorry, thank you very much. I just want to jump in and add one thing for a lot of the room here, because that's my experience very often, right? People come to me when it's too late in the day.
Yeah, not at the beginning.
And the one constant, I think, apprehension people have in their minds is that going to a lawyer is very expensive. I can't afford it.
Yeah.
And I do resonate with that feeling. It can be expensive at times, and perhaps you're not at that place in your career where you feel that it's an investment worth making to protect your rights, your work, and so on and so forth. I feel even for that, and again, I've said this multiple times to creators, that there are just certain hygiene factors that you can inculcate in your professional work lives, right? For example, when you're even if you agree to take on a project, just record an email. 9 out of 10 times we don't even do that, right? हमने बस बना के एक invoice भेज दिया है. उस invoice का description क्या है? If you feel that you needed to hold on to the rights, why does your invoice say services rendered to XYZ production company? Why are you using the word services then? So tiny things like this. Up email mein likhiye, right? If you feel that you need, I'm going to do this. This is my timeline. These are my milestones to deliver X, Y, and Z. These are my milestones to get paid. I expect this sort of credit. You send that email, so there is some written record of you having communicated it. The rest we'll figure out. So that's just one tiny tip to everybody.
No, it's a very good tip, but the point is that a lot of people at the beginning of their career, I've been writing for 25, 30 years now, but it takes time for you to learn that, this is how you protect yourself. And this is where I want to bring in Zama as the, not just as a general secretary of this thing, but also as a writer himself. How do you mentor young writers to do this? How do you ensure that at least basic awareness, yeah, आपकी कोई website है, how does it work?
नहीं, इसके लिए हम लोग काफ़ी वर्कशॉप्स करते रहते हैं. अभी भी हमने मतलब ऑलमोस्ट लास्ट 6 months में हमने 5-6 वर्कशॉप्स किए हैं where we want to educate our writers.
Young writers.
We want them to know their rights. We want them how to apply that. Like Priyanka said कि अगर आप ये सब भेज रहे हो तो किस तरह से भेजना है, क्या करना है, because writers भी the problem is कि वो भी lazy mode में अपना भेज दिया, कुछ भी कर दिया,
लिख
फोन पे
दिया तो
आया.
काम खत्म.
You won't believe कि कई बार हमारे पास DSC है जो dispute committee settlement committee है, वहाँ पे आता है WhatsApp पे आपने सीन भेजा हुआ है. So this is nonsensical. मतलब आप WhatsApp पे सीन लिख रहे हो, ये तो अपने लिए भी इंसल्टिंग है. So if a producer wants you, कह रहे हम अटके हुए हैं कहीं पे सीन लिख के भेज दो, अरे bullshit. मतलब आप क्यों WhatsApp पे भेजोगे? मतलब you are typing on WhatsApp. Scene means even you don't love your scene. So that's the thing. हमारे DSC में इस तरह के केसेस आते हैं where we find even writers are wrong. So उनको हम educate करते हैं. The idea is basically हम लोगों को प्रॉब्लम जो आ रही है राइटर्स में और प्रोड्यूसर्स में, द अप्रोच विच शकुन राइटली पुट इट, कि एक अप्रोच क्या है टुवर्ड्स द राइटर. दिस इज सो ह्यूमिलिएटिंग. आपके पूरे बजट के इसमें हम कहाँ फिट आते हैं, नंबर 1. नंबर 2, क्रेडिट में फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं, ये हैं, आप सारी दुनिया में एक पर्टिकुलर प्लेस क्रेडिट का फिक्स किया हुआ है आपने कि सेकेंड लास्ट जो होगा वो राइटर रिटन बाय होगा. आपको यहाँ अप्लाई करने में क्या प्रॉब्लम आ रही है?
अच्छा, they don't apply it here.
No, वो कहीं भी डाल देंगे, फर्स्ट, सेकंड, थर्ड, फोर्थ.
Please note there is no platform.
सारी दुनिया में आप एक चीज फॉलो करते हैं. Why here you are मतलब finding it difficult? हाँ, कि मैं कहाँ पे रखूँ, आपको प्लेसमेंट कहाँ पे दूँ? Can you imagine? आप टीवी में उससे भी बुरा हाल है. मैं टीवी से बिलोंग करता हूँ. टीवी में उससे भी बुरा हाल है. वो 6 प्लेट्स होंगे, इसमें नाम होंगे, और टीवी में सबसे ज्यादा राइटर्स होते हैं.
और वो तो असेंबली लाइन राइटिंग होती है.
स्टोरी राइटर, डेली सोप में स्टोरी राइटर्स 5 हैं, स्क्रीन प्ले राइटर्स 4 हैं, डायलॉग राइटर्स 3 हैं. तो उसमें चुन्नू मुन्नू की तरह नाम आता है. ऊपर स्टोरी, स्क्रीन प्ले, डायलॉग लिख दिया, नीचे अंजुम, शकुन, आतिका, ये नो फुल नेम. व्हाई आई एम राइटिंग? So the problem is with the approach. आप हमें समझ के आ रहे हैं. Where do we fit into your scheme of thing?
Fantastic.
Do you value us? Number 1. Number 2, मैं अगेन ये बोल रहा हूँ कि ये जो एक बात हो रही थी कि टिपिकल आप, हाँ, ओ
No, it's okay. What?
नो, मैंने समझा कि थोड़ा मिक्स हो जाए.
It's okay.
So the thing is कि you are following. अभी हमारा pitch fest में हुआ था, and there is one platform that didn't agree with our agreement, and they had some problem कि नहीं, global level पे हमें हमारा ये नहीं हो सकता है ये वो. If you are following your global rule, then follow that global rule. फिर सारी चीजें करो हमारे साथ वैसे ही. So why India is exceptional?
Got it. Atika?
I can take it exactly
Yes.
from here.
Yeah,
Why
and also
India is
bring in your
exceptional.
experience. Bring in your
Yeah,
experience.
and that is also my experience, so it's the same answer actually. I'll tell you why India is exceptional, because I think a lot of our feudalism comes from the society that we are. We cannot just actually blame the producers. Actually, we are a very hierarchical, caste and class fraught society, and we we enter a room and we basically already are dividing the room between what we perceive of them. This is the basic fundamental problem with India. Beyond this, everything else is anarchic. Like, I have been in this industry for 15 years and I've worked my ass off. I pardon my French, but there is no other way of saying it. I've worked my ass off to like cling on to 5 big credits. I must have worked on easily 22 projects and counting to get 5 releases. And
with your name on it.
Yes.
Which give you proper credit.
Yes, and it's only in the last 3 years that I have managed to bargain, thanks to like much empowerment from SWA, Anjum sir, that I have managed to keep my foot down on top credits. This is the first time in the last 2 years that I've seen 3 releases with top credits, where I have put my foot down. And when I bargain for that, I also given that kind of commitment. Like, I see through the project to the last beat. Even when other writers come on board, I want to be present. I want to be part. So I have, for example, the other thing, when there's one more thing I want to quickly address is, I'm done seeking morality from my producers. I don't care. I want my legality in place. I want the picket line to exercise my legality. I don't care for your rhetoric anymore. I want my money, I want my credit, I want a professional relationship. I don't care how you treat me, if you give me a business class ticket but do not pay my fee on time, do not give me the proper credit. I don't care. You can treat me the way you like. I don't want to be your friend. So if you service me correct in social parties, I don't care. I want because that is where my work comes from. So for me, also for writers to understand this, I'm also saying this for writers. I feel writers also sway very easily, and that is where the first thing that I began with. I guess Indian society is formed so much on how we treat others or how we hope to be treated, that we kind of like stop looking at the larger game. Why are you doing this in the first place? You're doing this for your creative credit. Fuck everything else. So I think that is why we never aggressive enough, we never firm enough for our rights, and we just keep giving into like, smaller, we keep thinking that someone else will be moral enough to service us right.
Depend on the goodwill of others.
We are not at the mercy of that. Just do your work and do it legally, and do it and hope for legal recognition.
Yeah. One thing it comes across clearly, and please feel free, audience, to jump in from this point onwards with questions. But one thing which comes across, Anjum, clearly is this collective bargaining is important. But you're not bargaining with one body. We discussed this earlier. How long and protracted do you think this process is? And also, do you think it is back? I mean, can you think somebody like an SWA can hold out a 150, 60-day strike? Himmati nahi hogi. I think at least many of the smaller writers who are not that well paid might break the strike. I don't see. So I'm just curious how you see this process unfurling.
See, at the moment, while we are legally a trade union, we are approaching this whole thing in a very professional way, that there is a professional body which is negotiating, keeping in mind the other point of view also. And we are, believe you me. The thing is that we don't have an AMPTP. Here, an association here. We do have a guild, but that guild is not really like the union of those producers. It's just a loose body, which is like a lobbying organization. So we have to approach each one. So the strategy that we are employing at the moment is we're starting from the top. The bigger producers, whether it's Yodharma, Excel, Maddock, and Nikhil's, and platforms, the bigger platforms. With the whole idea that once the top 10, 15, 20 see reason and they say, yeah, okay, they declare that we are in agreement with this, that this arbitration will be this way, this is the minimum fee, we are agreeing to that, then it becomes easier to go down the line. Okay? So that's what we are aiming to do. Will it take time? Yeah. Will it take protracted negotiations? Yes. Will Priyanka be involved in that? Yes. Okay? Yeah.
Just one thing, just to come back a bit to Zama's point, when the global platforms don't give credits in the same format, I don't understand, Priyanka, how is that legally possible? Like, Netflix is a listed company, Amazon is a listed company. Why would they not why is the format different for countries?
No, because the format is not being prescribed by law. The law simply says that you have a right to be identified as the author, but the law is not going into stating it has to be in the opening, end, etc., etc. We have a
WGA has clarified that, but here that is not. Is that?
I don't think the law is going to be able to make a lot of changes. We've seen this in the music industry where we had landmark royalties, rights cases in music that I don't even know if those are necessarily being, Priyanka knows better than anyone. I feel like the writers need to identify with the producers. Because at the same time that writers are hurting, and I'm gonna sound really crazy here, a lot of producers are in a state of kind of figuring out what's gonna happen to them. Most of the revenues that used to be in the business are going away. And it has a lot to do with streaming, it has a lot to do with digital. And if you look at what the WGA was able to do, they were able to get streaming bonuses. I think producers would stand side by side with writers, with the platforms to say, if we have something that's done extremely well, then we should get paid for it. And the other thing is, in the new WGA deal, they're actually paying Hollywood writers for viewership in India, which is ridiculous. Think about it. A Hollywood writer's work gets monetized in success more than an Indian writer's work does. So you used to be able to say, oh, it's just a Hollywood thing. But now Hollywood's getting paid for Indian views at the same rate as US views. So, to your point, we've got listed billion-dollar companies who come to us and we're in negotiations. I often, one of my best lines in a negotiation is, wait, you're a billion-dollar company and you're asking this lone writer to reduce by 50,000 rupees? Like, have you been to your canteen? Have you seen the lunches you serve?
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So I think where we can find shared issues, AI, shared issues, success, residual, shared issues when it comes to digital, and especially with AVOD coming, I think that those may be the first places to go. I don't necessarily think that the producers, at least in the world of streaming, are the ultimate enemy of the writer. I think as a collective industry, there's bigger global changes that are coming to bear on us and we need to stand up and fight them. And on some of them, we need to fight together.
I so agree because I just finished a lot of work on AI and what it's doing. ZTV is doing huge amounts of scripting with AI. But it appeared yesterday or day before, I think. But the point is, I think our basics are not in place. Anjum. Your basic contracts are, at this point, sorry, does anybody have any questions here? If you identify who you are and then ask a specific question, it would be lovely.
Hello. So I'm Nikesh. I am new member of SWA. So I have the basic question. So if I contacted a producer first and the script is written by the nod of a producer, means if I narrate a story to him and he tells, yeah, it's interesting, you should write it, okay, and without contacting SWA, okay, means we are talking with producer and he sees the first draft and approves that, okay, you can write it better, and if something, some conflict arises after that, and SWA is not contacted first, okay, so will SWA or other union members will take this case if something, some conflict arises? So my question is to Anjum sir or Zama sir.
नहीं, आप कभी भी आ सकते हैं अगर आप मेंबर हैं तो एडवाइजेबल ये है कि whenever you are in touch with the producer and you are signing the contract, better you come with your contract because you have your legal expert over there जो free में आपका वहाँ पे हमारे SWA में है, वो आपको गाइड करेंगे कि हाँ क्या क्या क्लॉजेस पे आप फाइट कर सकते हैं, क्या ये कर सकते हैं, किस चीज़ को आप क्वेश्चन मार्क लगाइए, वो आपको बेहतर तरह से गाइड कर सकते हैं. सो यू कैन कम. तो अच्छा है कि शुरू में ही आ जाइए, बाद में भी आ सकते हैं.
Just wanted to know the ideal approach to go to a producer as a writer. What should be the ideal approach?
I don't know if there's an ideal approach.
आइडियल अप्रोच बहुत अच्छी कहानी लेके जाइए, उसमें कोई अच्छे कपड़े पहनने की जरूरत नहीं है, कहानी अच्छी लगेगी।
शकुन,
मैं एक यही बात बोलना था, हम लोग IPR की बात कर रहे हैं मगर इतने सारे राइटर स्क्रिप्ट भेज रहे हैं जो किसी और की पिक्चर वैसे ही 3 बार देख चुके हैं वो लोग पिक्चर। तो दूसरी बात, ऐसे काफ़ी बार मेरे पास लोग आते हैं कि सर मेरे पास आइडिया है, मैं आपको डेवलप करके देता हूँ। प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि जब तक कहानी का आपने कोई पैसा नहीं लिया है, जब तक मैंने आपकी कहानी में कोई कंट्रीब्यूशन नहीं दिया है, वो कहानी आपकी है। एज ए डायरेक्टर प्रोड्यूसर मैं आपको बोल रहा हूँ, आपने मेरे को कहानी सुनाई, उससे ये नहीं होगा कहानी मेरी हो गई कि मैंने आपको बोल दिया हाँ लिख दो तो मैंने बोल दिया। बट यू हैव टू बी देन केयरफुल, डोंट स्टार्ट गेटिंग कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस फ्रॉम मी, डोंट स्टार्ट डूइंग 5 स्टोरी सेशंस विद मी, गेट माई इनपुट, बिल्ड अ स्टोरी एंड देन से अरे कहानी तो अभी भी, you have to be careful about those things, and that's why we all big studios will get you to do an NDA. Get an NDA for yourself when you're submitting a story, that also safeguards you. So that's why you need SWA, legal, these things are important. Get your everything should be on email, everything should be on paper. I just don't believe in कि अच्छा आप मेरे से मिले और हम दोनों को अच्छा लगा तो काम करते हैं। That era is over.
Yeah.
Just don't fall for that.
Yeah. इसमें मैं एक ऐड करूंगा कि ऑनेस्टली मैं सारे राइटर्स से रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि यू हैव टू हैव एटलीस्ट 4-5 कंप्लीट स्टोरीज दैट यू शुड बी कॉन्फिडेंट अबाउट, यू गो देयर एंड सेल इट। उसमें कोई डायरेक्टर और प्रोड्यूसर का इनपुट लेने की जरूरत नहीं। दिस इज माय स्क्रिप्ट, कंप्लीट स्क्रिप्ट लेना है, चाहिए बोलो।
एक और चीज जो मेरे को एक बार बहुत हेल्प किया, जब कपूर एंड सन्स आई तो किसी ने बोला ये मेरी कहानी है, ये तो आपसे मैं मिला हूँ, ये कहानी मेरी है आप। सो थैंकफुली आई हैव ऑलवेज हैड अ हैबिट दैट एवरी डे आई मेक अ न्यू फाइल ऑफ व्हाट आई एम राइटिंग and I saved it on Dropbox or Google Drive. So if I have written something for 1 year, I have every day file as I wrote.
Yeah.
So I called this writer and I opened close to a year and a half of literally daily work or weekly work. And I said, you tell me, where do you see suddenly a new story come in? I've built this over a year and a half. So have register drafts over multiple times, register story, beat outline, keep registering it. Don't think कि हाँ मेरे दिमाग में है और बाद में 2 महीने बाद register करा देंगे. Keep track of what you're doing, keep track of what you're sending others, get an NDA. These things are very, very important. Just I highly request everyone here never to take these things lightly and just do all of that.
I email myself. Everything that I think and I write, every draft I email it to myself, and that's an automatic timestamp.
Yeah, I just want to quickly jump in then. Registration is such an important point because unlike trademark, you don't need necessarily a registration with the copyright registry for you to have registration in your script. That's one. Number 2, even if your script is unpublished, right, which means you've created it, it's sitting on your computer, it still already has copyright protection. For you to have copyright, it has to be expressed, which means it has to be in some form that's tangible, and it has to be original. So long as you meet these 2 criteria, it has copyright automatically. Then everything else that you do, like emailing it to yourself, going and registering with the SW, etc., are all methods to establish timestamps.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
हाय अंजुम सर, मेरा सवाल ये था कि न्यू कमर्स राइटर्स के लिए क्या ऐसी कुछ सुविधा है कि हम SW के तहत कुछ अच्छे स्क्रिप्ट को स्टडी कर सकें?
Is there a facility at SWA where young writers can look at good scripts?
Yes, that initiative actually is on. So we're trying to put together a library
Good question.
of good scripts. But even before that happens, you'll still find on the net Indian scripts also. If you go to, which is that site, Modified Club, and just do a search on Hindi film scripts or Indian film scripts, and there are a lot of good scripts. You choose which ones do you find better, and you read those. In terms of foreign international scripts, there are thousands which are available. But we're trying to also put together a repository of certain select scripts which we believe would be educative in nature. So yeah, it should be coming.
You know what? One of the things, Anjum, which you touched upon, but we didn't get into detail, was a minimum sort of payment for script writers, and then, how do you tackle the question of residuals? Because we don't even talk, which are called royalties here. So how do you tackle these two questions? I don't know if that, just briefly.
Yeah, ideally what we had prepared was slab-wise, that we said that if there's a production budget below 5 crore, then it should be 12 lakh for the script. If it is between 5 and 15 crore, then it should be 24 lakh for the script. And if it's above 15 crore, the budget, then it should be a minimum of 36 lakh. This is the slab that we prepared, and this is the first discussion, negotiation which I had with Excel, Ritesh Sidhwani, and he agreed with that. He said, okay, yeah, this is fair because this fits into my whole economic ideology. And we announced it in the press. Now, here what is happening is that in this first round of negotiation that we are embarking on, I don't want to get into this whole slab thing because there becomes an accountability issue. I mean, how are we to say in the beginning when there is no budget, when the costing hasn't been done, as to what the budget is likely to be? So, in most likelihood, the producer will say, "Bhaiya, this is a very low budget film," which everybody says.
He will say 5 crore.
Shakun is vigorously shaking his head, nodding, because that is how he must have started out. Everybody calls this, "Nahi, ye bahut low budget hai." Okay. The point is, later on, if the budget goes up, if Shah Rukh agrees to do that, where is the writer going to chase that and do it? So we still don't have that system in place. So all I'm asking for right now is a protection for the new writers, that no script should be paid below 12 lakh. That should be the minimum, is all we are asking.
And this negotiation with studios that you're starting today, how many studios have you lined up? And, I'm very curious about the next steps, actually. I just like, will this happen in our lifetime kind of question?
Well, right now I have lined up a dozen, from which I am one by one fixing up meetings. 2 have already been fixed. Okay, I'm not sort of naming them publicly, but yes, I have. So this is what we intend to do. So I'm hoping that by the end of December, which means the next 2 months, I should have finished a round with these 12 people.
Fantastic.
Okay, yeah. Fantastic. And then Priyanka will help out.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, a gentleman there had a question. Yeah.
So my name is Priyarth Mukherjee. I have been writing and recently producing as well. Last 2 years, there have been 4 contracts that I have negotiated, and there are 2 terms that has always made me uncomfortable. I have never worked on it or fought with the platform for it. That's derivative rights and perpetual rights. Now, my question is pretty simple. Like when you're creating something out of thin air, out of scratch altogether, is a writer not entitled even for 5 or 10% of that royalty or rights altogether? And how do we go about it? Because I think with every platform, perpetual rights comes by default. And since it comes by default from every platform, it's very difficult to even say that I'll go to the next platform if you don't give me a particular part. Also, the nature, while producing, I produce very niche of television, that is reality. And it has a huge potential of being produced in seasons and seasons and seasons. So even when it comes to the value of perpetual rights, when we try to identify that, it is something that is so vague because the show might go for 2 seasons or 20 seasons. My question is, will I be cut off? And if I don't want to be cut off, how do I go about it?
Okay, I was asking Caleb if you want to take that one, but I think I'll try and answer it. So with derivative works, to simplify it, it is possible to ask for what we call a right to attachment, right? That, hey, if this goes into a subsequent season, then I want to be attached because I was the original creator. And I'm just saying this broadly, of course it depends on what is the IP that is being created in the first place, right? But let's suppose that it's something original, you're setting up a universe, etc. As the creator, you could negotiate the right to have, to be associated with derivatives. Now, whether it's a, subsequent season or it's a character spin-off and so on and so forth. Or let's take a very different example. Say you've written something in Hindi, but it's going to be made now in Tamil, Telugu, etc. You might want to remain attached for one of those recreations or remakes. So it is possible. It is, again, a contractual fix. It is not something that is a matter of entitlement under the Copyright Act. And as far as what you're calling perpetual rights, I'm assuming what you're describing is when the other side insists that they are going to have complete ownership and control of the IP, correct? That is, again, a commercial practice. Of course, if I am commissioning something, I am paying for it, I am producing it, and the definition of a producer under the Copyright Act is really the person who's responsible for putting a project together in a broad sense. He or she is going to want something in return. So it is not an unreasonable or an illegal ask to want to own 100% of the material. But even in that scenario, you could still ask for a right to be associated, or I'll give you another fix, a right of first refusal. Sometimes maybe you've moved on in your career. You don't think, okay, I don't write in this language, or this is not my skill set. If something is being made for X and is now going to be adapted in a completely different universe, you might say, no, thanks for asking, not me, happy for you to go ahead. So there are all sorts of things, and Caleb and I can, I think, negotiate endlessly and keep going what we call as fallback options, right? Okay, if A doesn't work, then option B, option C, option D. But you gotta keep at it.
And I love that you bring up derivative rights, ancillary rights. These are these wonderful words that they hide. But this is where we get super aggressive, right? We had a client who did an unscripted show which was about comedians, and it turned out to be a huge global hit. But what we did is that we froze the derivative rights. Because at the point where we were doing it, no one thought the show would do anything. It turned out to be a huge hit. And so now, 2 years later, we're arguing on, how much we should get paid on shoes, how much we should get paid if we do sunglasses, right? Like, that's why you need an ecosystem. You can't create if you're thinking about shoes 2 years down the line. That's what, a good team will do for you. And, that's one way to solve your problem.
And if I can say one thing, because Caleb and I have, negotiated a contract literally for 6 months. And one thing I think when you're starting out, you don't realize is that negotiating contract is not something you do it over a lunch table in like 2 hours. Sometimes it's so nuanced that it can take time, and you have to be patient. And you have to be patient knowing the intent of the other person. If you know the intent is right, you are right. You can continue to have conversations, especially on the finer details and all of that. But sometimes when I'm dealing with writers, you deal with people who have never done it before. They start getting angry, they start getting impatient. You have to understand both sides of the things, before you really start working on that. So that's my other thing.
There's one point which Atika and Zama both raised, and which I don't know how one tackles it, but this thing of dignity. The dignity of the labor or the work of the writer, and how he's treated not just in the negotiation but generally. Because credit, the attitude towards credit also stems from that, I think. From your attitude. When we talk about approval, Caleb, you use the word approval construct, I think, and term fascinates me. But, what can SWA do there? I know that dignity can't be mandated. You can't. It's a social, this thing. But how do you tackle something like this? I know, बहुत गंदा सवाल है. I agree.
No, I think, no, it's not. The point is, it's also not just the approach of the producer, it's also the approach of the writer. Yeah. The writer to feel confident that this work has value. And this is something where a good film can come out of this, which will actually give the opposite party a profit. So that sense of confidence has to be there, which means that the writer has to work towards bettering her craft, ensuring that the caliber of their competency has to rise. Atika also began with what? Nothing when she came to the course. She didn't know anything. She'd never written a script in her life. She worked, and now she goes with confidence. And I'll give you one example, which I haven't even told her. One producer came to me and he said, it's all very well that you teach all these youngsters and your students that they should fight for their rights and they should demand, etc. One of your students, and he mentioned her, came in, said, before even I have discussed what the project is, she said, hang on, let me first make it clear. This is how much I will charge if you're asking me to write the screenplay. He says, it was so offensive to me and I felt so insulted. I said, but this is precisely why it is important for her to say it, because your attitude is that how can you ask for money? Which is why she's asking for money. And he told me, which I haven't even shared with her, he said, this is not the way for her to make a career. I think you should warn her. I said, nothing of the kind. I never told her. This is her career. The 3 films that is being released, it's being talked about all over the place, in Cannes, in Australia. There are premieres that she's being flown for.
I have two films in
there you
Mami
go.
this year. But
So I'm saying it's, Atika, 1 second, please. It's also that approach that SWA can talk about certain basic principles.
But you have to work
when
on your
you
craft.
go to the table, I would suggest that there should be two factors in your mind for a good negotiation. Number one, you should have the ability to see the other person's point of view. Okay. And number two, you should be ready to walk. You should have the courage to say no. Beyond the point, if you feel that those fallbacks are not working, thank you very much. This is now affecting my dignity. I am off this table. Once they know that, that is when I think the negotiation acquires a certain balance. Right now they feel you are the one in need. कि तुम नहीं तो कोई और लिखेगा. But no, you know that the unique way in which you write, what you bringing to the table, no other writer will bring to the table. So thank you very much. You want me, you pay me my value. So that attitude also goes towards altering.
Can I quickly answer on that? It's like even earlier I was wanting to put this in context. Like when people socialize or hustle their way and they try to like wine and dine with you, thinking you're going to give them a discount on your fee, is the reason why I respond to that with I am expensive. There is 15 years of work that has gone into making this career, and of course I will say that. And I did. If they looked at it as their personal humiliation, then clearly it goes on to state where they were coming from. That's one. Because I think a worthy producer will not mind it at all. And anyway, anyone who socially like hangs with me in the elevator and tries to pitch me a film is not a suitable producer for me to work with. That's one. The second thing is like it's a funny sidebar, but I get like people on dating apps telling me like, will you write a script for me? So what the hell?
That's
a story idea.
Looking for writers.
I mean, I just like, are you saying that I shouldn't have a right to be discreet and discerning, and I shouldn't have like boundaries? I'm sorry, this goes both ways, right? Like, so.
Shakun, you wanted to say something? You were.
I think that's a great story idea. I should quickly get on all the apps. Just, put out 5 consignments.
Raya, I want Raya.
5 commission project, 1 on Tinder, 1 on Bumble. I love it. And I can get the scene on WhatsApp. So it's all digital. But having said that, I mean, everything is being done on WhatsApp. WhatsApp needs to come under copyright. Everything is on WhatsApp. I mean,
it's an encrypted, end-to-end encrypted.
People are just sending everything on WhatsApp. It's even writing samples. You speak to somebody, and I find it's unprofessional. You're meeting a writer. He's like, "Yeah, sir, I'll just send you a writing sample," and they're sending you like a 30-page writing sample on WhatsApp.
On WhatsApp.
Docs now. Yeah.
People send me screenshots of legal clauses saying, "आप पढ़ लीजिए ना, please. जल्दी से बता दीजिए चलेगा कि नहीं," on WhatsApp. But okay, sorry, I just.
Yeah, there's one lady there. Anupama, you have a question, or you're telling us to shut up because our time's up?
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So because we get a lot of conflicting advice. Really, my question is for Caleb. When is the right time to seek representation? Like,
when?
Great question.
No, it's a great question. You know, honestly, I think the right time is when you, are gigging and working. So at least after your first project has been set up. Because ultimately, to like Shakun's point or a number of other people's point, you may not need that firepower. We all have to pay our dues in this business. But I think as you begin to get into a world where, you're just after that first project, that's a really good time. Because then you'll be able to have a little bit more leverage, and a representative will be able to get a lot more for you rather than being a first time. But the right answer is whenever someone's willing to sign you.
I actually want to just add to that. I feel we have to change that worldview, because you meet writers and sometimes like, "Nahi yaar, I don't want to give commission." And I think that mindset has to change. It's not, you're not paying them just like that. They're really adding value. I personally think it's impossible. Also, when I meet writers, and Caleb, introduces me to a lot of young writers, we are constantly talking about writers. It's much easier for me to kind of engage with those writers. One, because I know the team's going to send me sample work, they're going to send me NDAs, everything is kind of in order, I don't have to overthink it. And I personally prefer to have creative discussion with one person and a commercial discussion with the other. Because I've realized when you're doing creative commercial with the same person, like Atika said, there sometimes seems to be this kind of discomfort of like, okay, how do I navigate, right? So I personally feel get an agent, a lawyer, the sooner, at some point when you have something that they find valuable, go for that. It's only going to help you. And over the years, that 10%, it's going to add up to you getting 50% more. So maybe not in the first job, maybe not in the second job, but it would eventually.
Yeah, Anupama, you want to say?
Caleb, send me my 10%.
Yeah. GST invoice page.
Okay, 2 questions. One, of course, is a request. I know we do not have OTT studio representation today. However, for everybody in this room, including me, it would really help if we could differentiate between the producer and the studio. One actually somewhere is wanting to get a film made at any cost, at any price, but not at the cost of his or her own dignity and the team's dignity and rights. So that's the producer. And then there is a studio or the guy who's bankrolling the film. And the dynamics are very different. I would really request we kind of establish the difference between the two, because I think therein lies the difference that we are talking about right now, the attitude and the approach. Yeah. So there is one is signing off on rights, the other one is demanding and saying assignment of rights, right? So if we can just clarify that, that's one. I think let's deal with that first.
Wants to take that on?
Can we club studios and OTTs as one?
Yeah,
Because they're technically 3.
Yeah. Who's taking that?
I can take it.
Okay.
See, earlier, the producer was the one who would own the rights. So the writer would actually sell the script, and I'm talking about pre-amendment. Sell the script to the producer. The producer either would raise the finance from the distributors or from some Sage or from some builder or from, you know what, from black market. Okay, he would raise the money and make sure that the film is made, and he would control the rights for that. Now what has happened is that with the studios coming in and the platforms coming in, they are the ones who finance it. So therefore they insist on taking all the rights. Now the producer many times, not many times, but I think most times has been reduced to actually being a line producer with a certain commission that you will get 10% from this. Or if it's a big producer, you will get 15% out of it that way. The profits and all the other spin-offs that ensue, the platform or the studio retains for themselves. So this is also what Caleb was talking about, that we need to ensure that the producers themselves, who are also suffering on account of this changed ecosystem where the studios and the platforms are controlling all the rights and therefore the decisions, that they should be on our side. The problem here is that they don't want to be on our side. Okay, we are happy to work with them. Even with the television thing, we had many discussions saying we actually should stand by, both you and us should be able to argue for our rights there, which they don't want. Even though the producer would be able to get a share of the royalty, but here they seem to be happy to accept money upfront and sign away their own rights. What we accuse writers and new writers of doing, why aren't you careful about that? But he said, paisa mil raha tha to maine de diya. Exactly what the producers are doing, whether it's television or film. So what is happening here is that now that kind of monolith of studios and platforms and even broadcasters, basically largely the multinationals have come in here, and these are the people who are actually controlling the business.
Yes, I agree with you 1,000%, and this is my secret passion.
Yeah.
Why is it that our overlords are all doing global businesses? You know, when a Shakun's movie comes out, and I love his movies obviously, it's across 277 countries. You know, we do a lot of SVOD rights deals where we fight on behalf of directors with the OTT saying, what is the value? And they tend to say to us, well, in India, it's only worth this much. But then I point out, you know, a Gangubai is popular in Thailand, it's popular in the US. How are we valuing that? Oh, no, that's not how it works. And so there's this massive dichotomy that's happening, a massive slight hypocrisy, and maybe not even slight, between how producers, writers, directors, and authors are being treated in India versus globally. And I hear you on that, and we should talk about that, because I do feel like that's where the battlefront is.
It is true what is being indicated here, and let me articulate it. Okay, that there are double standards, that what the Hollywood writers are being promised by these very same companies. Okay, those same companies are denying those things here, which is basically the modern day East India Company here. Why are they able to do that? Because they can. That's a simple thing. And they will not stop unless there is an ability here collectively to say, no, we will not submit to this, we want the same thing from there. So that, I think it's important now for us to become more aware and conscious of that, and to take action based on that conviction, that we will not be subjected to double standards. This is modern day colonialism, no?
Which also, I think it's that red tag. They switched off the mic. Which also brings me to some sort of a summary of sorts. I mean, not a summary, but I'm just asking. Just like in the US, the Writers Guild got in the cine artists and everybody. I mean, it became a collective solidarity between two sets of talent. Yeah, there was a writing talent who were creating those roles for the performing talent, and somewhere that symbiotic relationship, which of course exists across the world, that kind of got brought in, and they collectively stood up, and that was the might. Actually, that was the might of the strike.
Actually, there's a correction there.
Yeah.
It wasn't out of solidarity that SAG-AFTRA went on strike. It is that it was time for them to renegotiate their thing.
Yeah.
And which they were not getting what they wanted, so it just happened to coincide.
Symbiotic, yeah. And then
otherwise,
it became
I would not know.
thing.
Otherwise, it would be very difficult to expect that the entire acting community would, in solidarity, go on strike. They would picket. They came down onto the streets in 2007 when it took place. The Golden Globes was cancelled, so that they did. But calling for a strike, that's, I'm afraid,
I know,
a
it
little
coincided,
beyond.
and then it
happened
got
to
built
coincide.
into a narrative.
Yeah.
Which I'm saying is great timing, and I think that's what it is all about, that how do you take these opportunities and build narratives. I'm saying, are we saying in this country, given the fact that there are producers, independent producers, who really, really want to make films in a certain way with respect and dignity and rights given. They also want to earn that money, no? That 10% premium or whatever they charge, I mean, what is it compared to what they would earn actually if they actually fought for their back ends, etc. Like Caleb, you said that in India I did this business, but in Thailand it was this much. What about that? So I'm saying somewhere there has to be, after this probably, another edition if we do, it should be writers, the SWA, the Producers Guild, coming in together collectively and having these conversations, or are we doing this already? That's my question. Is there a next step?
Yeah, we're doing that, but we're doing that across the table. What she means is on the same side of the table, across the platforms and the multinationals. Yeah.
I'm sorry, as an independent producer, which is my other hat, when I sit across that table, I have a problem with the studio. I have a problem with the guy who's bankrolling a project, because I do want to make that film with dignity. I want my writer paid. I want backends coming in. I want that to be acknowledged.
So they should come with us. They should come with us.
Yes, so that's
that we
my
can
question.
sit
How do we
together.
do this? I don't think we are across. We should be on the same side, is what I'm saying.
Independent producers, of course, but I'm saying if their interests coincide, okay, if there is a common ground on which we can stand together and argue, yes, in which case then there can be absolutely added symbiotic solidarity.
There is a climate for
Then in which case, we are more than happy. Anupama, we are more than happy if there is a possibility of people approaching us by saying that, okay, let us try and work out a common minimum ground on which we are able to stand together, and then we will stand in solidarity with the other. There's no problem at all.
On TV front, we have been tried all the producers, they didn't come on board.
See, one simple thing with the TV, what happened, I'll tell you where the key issue lies, Vanita, which is that for the TV producer to remain the owner of the copyright, they should invest in the project. But at the moment, the easy way out is that they're already getting finance upfront in advance. So they would prefer that rather than stand for this. So they're okay with the short-term gain and losing out on royalties, in royalties which will be for 60 years after their life comes to an end. If they're going to live another 40 years, we're talking about 100 years of royalty coming from TV. They're willing to forego that for this upfront financing. Then in which case it collapsed. I mean, so many rounds of meeting we had. We said, we're willing to stand by this. They wanted us to argue for them. But you have to come with us. And you have to
But
do
it's
your bit.
across.
Ecosystem works differently. The cinema ecosystem actually works differently, at least in this country.
No,
TV is all commissioned. And
But that is what is happening here. I'm saying once the script, the producer gets a script, okay, and a project is being put together, that proposal is taken immediately for finance to a studio or to a platform, and those are the ones who finance it.
By the way, in the UK,
They're not putting their own money.
Same thing is happening to films now.
Same system is being repeated.
It's going to be commissioned.
So
Then why-
they're rendered powerless, and they don't want to do anything to antagonize these biggies, and that is where we get isolated.
in 2004 in the UK, they changed the IP law and they made it mandatory for the IP in television, especially for because UK and the Netherlands are the biggest producers of formats and original this thing. They changed the law and said that IP cannot be given to the broadcaster. It has to be only with the production company. And that began a rush by other people, sales agents, other the whole syndication and global market burst open for the UK. Otherwise there was a BBC had a 25% quota, and I don't know if there's some jiggery pokery that is possible with the IP laws or copyright. This is Priyanka's, and which can act as a catalyst, is my point.
I think to your point, and I love that messaging around what happened in the UK, because there's so many massive multi-billion-dollar companies that were founded, so many jobs created, just because they...
Celador,
all of them.
you name them. All
It
these
all comes
companies
from
were
that.
born because of that.
It all comes from that.
See,
And I know
India and America are the only two countries where there is no state financing or state subsidy available for film production. Almost all the other countries, they do that.
India has no import quotas. Any film can be screened in this country. China has an import quota of 34 films a year, not more than 34 films. So you have to fight to be that one Hollywood film or one Hindi film to go to China. We have nothing like this. Yet 90% of our box office is Indian films.
It was.
85 ho gaya hoga.
It is right now more than 25 to 30% is going to Hollywood. It used to be 5% at one time.
Utna nahi hua hai.
Vanita, I'm talking about the guild figures.
I'm talking about EY figures. Okay? I'm using Ernst & Young figures. Okay, which is what I use
I'm
for
telling you,
analysis.
it is, find out again, it's a minimum of 25%.
We'll do this
Yeah,
offline.
let's
We'll
just
do this
compare
offline.
that. Because
But
on the stage I said that and I got corrected.
The broader point I'm trying to make is that Indians vote for Indian cinema purely because it stands on its own feet and it delivers what they want to watch. And if we cannot support this, whether it's the SWA, whether it's with Indies, with Mami, whatever it is, then shame be on us, yeah.
There's no future then.
So
Yeah, and we've got to fight for what matters. You know, we're arguing over credits and where the credits place, all that.
That's fair enough.
And then you go home, you put on Netflix or you put on anything, you watch the movie, and then at the end it says, skip credits.
I find that so irritating because I want to see I'm the only
So
Indian
what,
who says
so
what
what really matters, right? What really matters? And I think that's what we've got to focus on. And I think as an industry, writers, directors, actors, we're at a stage where India as a country is poised to do so much in the next 10 years. I'm so excited about
You
it.
see
But
the
as
shows
an
is
industry, are we empowering each other to also grow? And I think that's the big win, what we need to do.
You know, when you look at the shows which are trending, the films which are trending on global lists, not on India lists, across OTTs, it tells you there's so much more we could be doing and, leveraging. But anyway, this is a different discussion.
One last question, and I know then we should wrap up.
Yeah, you should be telling us to shut up.
This question, because a lot of people asked me when, some of them are not here, they had asked me this question when we said we're doing this session. And they're writers, what are moral rights? What is royalty? How does it flow back to an Indian writer? And then, of course, we've spoken so much about assignment of rights. So when you do assignment of rights, and why do we separately give away the moral rights, is what they broadly asked when we brought
Okay,
up
we're going to
this
split the
session.
question between Priyanka and myself. I'm going to talk about royalties, you're going to talk about section 57.
Perfect, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, you deal with section 57, I'll deal with 19, yeah. So royalty is very simple. The Copyright Act says that when your work is monetarily exploited or is monetized outside of a cinema hall, wherever, whether it's on television, satellite, OTT, web, mobile phone, wherever it is that happens, from there, from that value which is generated, you get a percentage which is called royalty. Now that royalty which comes in is split in two parts. 50% goes to the owner of the copyright of that work, and 50% goes to the writer/writers if there is a team. That is how it is done. This is collected through a copyright society which has to be set up for that category of work, which is for scripts, which is what we are struggling to get registered. Okay, and Priyanka came and quietly touched that raw nerve with the first question. We are struggling with that because there's a little bit of ambiguity in the law which is being exploited by certain people. So you understand, when your work receives monetary value outside of a cinema hall, you get a royalty percentage. The percentage of that flows back to you as royalty. This is what royalty is, moral rights.
So
Okay.
then if we do not have a copyright,
Please take this
then
off.
we don't have royalty.
No. So that's,
It's-
I'll address that. I'll address that.
These are questions that have come.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
all valid questions. Just for historic background, the copyright law was amended in 2012. It is till date considered to be one of the most significant milestone amendments that we've seen in the copyright law. It took a lot of efforts on behalf of really a lot of the writers' lobby, authors, जो हम कहते हैं, under the Copyright Act. And two really important, significant developments were this introduction of your right to receive royalty and giving it a status of becoming an inalienable right. इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि अगर आप 100% कॉपीराइट भी किसी को असाइन कर दे या लाइसेंस कर दे, your right to receive royalty for exploitation, for use of your work is sacrosanct. That no one can strip you off. Why? Our historic contracts have said for a one-time lump sum payment of XYZ, all right title and interest, worldwide, perpetuity, all mode, mediums, formats, right? So to be able to protect the interests of authors, this right to receive royalty was made inalienable. So also you have what we call author's special rights or moral rights. Now moral rights as a concept did exist even under the Copyright Act previously, but it has been slightly more nuanced. We've introduced moral rights for performers as well, which was added in 2012. Both these rights, now here's where the controversy is around moral rights. I'll explain what moral rights are. They're really two different rights. One is the right to be recognized as the author of your works. So paternity or maternity of your works. And number two, the right to be able to prevent distortion or mutilation and to seek damages if your works have been distorted, mutilated. Now, what is distortion and mutilation of your works is a whole different debate, right? I'll give you a simple example of music. A lot of songs, purane jo gaane hain, hum iska, you know, the younger kids or the younger artists are remixing it, rehashing it, recreating them, and sometimes we've seen that original authors tend to feel deeply offended. Now, whether just the fact that I've recreated is distorting your works or not is subjective, and only a court of law can make that decision, okay? But these are your two rights. The reason that you are asked to separately, over and above your assignment of copyright, also asked to assign or waive your moral rights is because there is some amount of controversy that is your moral right also an inalienable right? Is it on the same footing as your right to receive royalty? So just like I can assign copyright, but I still have this sacrosanct right to receive royalty, do I also have the sacrosanct right to always be credited and to prevent distortion, mutilation? So that's why you're asked to separately waive it or assign it. There's a lot of pushback on those, especially for someone like me that's always on the side of more often than not on the side of the author, that hey, I'm not going to give up my right to receive credit or to be identified as the work. I don't see why I should be doing it. The real concern on the speaking on the side of the producers or the studio is really the second part, which is to prevent distortion, mutilation. Because just because my work is recreated, can you just say, can you be offended and say, hey, this is distortion, mutilation, and sue to get an injunction? So it is to prevent those sort of situations where the producer feels that, hey, I want to have some protection as far as you exercising this second right is also concerned. So I hope that helps explain a little bit more about moral rights. For any further information, I do a lot of informative videos on my Instagram, so please feel free to go check those out or send me questions and I'll try and address them there.
Priyanka, let me just add one small thing here. No, you have to take a mic because can't hear you. See here, just to add to this, Anupama, because it's a collaborative process, it's a work in progress. So I cannot submit a script and say you will not change a word about it. Then no business is possible because it will evolve. It has to, a good script is interpreted creatively, visually, right? So which is why they want, I waive these rights, but we put that thing to the extent permissible by law. So what do the laws say? That you will not change it in such a way that it harms my reputation. Because then there's also a commercial loss taking place. Because it harms my career. People may not want to see that. So kuch ashleel cheez aap kar rahe ho. So that is what we insert, to the extent permissible. That means I'll do it in such a way that it doesn't harm your reputation. Because integrity of the work is, I don't think there's been a single case which has been won on this yet.
Amarnath Sehgal, Union of India.
We're talking about like 28,000 years ago. But nothing has happened after the 2012 thing. Nothing has happened. No.
We don't go to court. We don't litigate enough. That's why we are still operating under ambiguity, and everything becomes industry practice.
Okay, great. I think we should wrap it up because this thing is starting to bleed now. The red is going into liquid.
You overstayed our welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjum, Shakun, Atika, Zama, Caleb, Priyanka and Vanita. Thank you so much for this very insightful session.